Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Giles and David, thank you for the overview and the global cloud landscape. I know we have certainly learned a lot from Giles and the cloud stack community, who is really prevalent in the EU and India and other countries. So it's great to hear that and share that out with the rest of the market. So today we're going to be sharing a customer story with NetSource One. Um, just a little bit of background on, well, I guess I'll introduce myself first and then a little bit of background on NetSource One before I hand it over to them for introductions. My name is David Humes. I'm the Vice President of Product Development here at US Signal. As it relates to this discussion, we became aware of changes in the virtualization landscape really late in 2023 and then certainly early into 2024. And one of the things that we did as an organization who, tries to be as customer centric as possible is bring our customers together in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we're headquartered for an advisory board. So back in February of 2024, we hosted an advisory board. Andy was able to attend from NSO. And, really what we wanted to get out of that advisory board is, we had our opinions over what we thought was going to be happening and what we should do. But we felt it was really important to bring our customers along with that journey because at the end of the day, we could build something that we thought was amazing, but if our customers didn't care about it or their customers didn't care about it, so what? And so when we brought that group of individuals into Grand Rapids, the takeaway, and Andy in particular was pretty vocal about his opinions on this was what we don't exactly care about from a MSP perspective in an IaaS hosting platform is we don't necessarily care what's under the hood hardware wise, and we don't necessarily care about the underlying virtualization platform. What we're particularly care about in those two cases is an SLA to back it up, right? So what we do care about though is price sensitivity, obviously very important, especially if you all consider that as a managed service provider, they're reselling services to their customers, and so they're in a bit of a unique position where cost increases on a vendor side may or may not be allowed to be passed on to their customers. And so there's a very important hedge against that. Performance, obviously, is still really important. So it wasn't a free reign to build something that was non-performant, but didn't necessarily care how we got there as long as we got there. Security as an obvious concern. There are compliant industries in both our customer base as well as NetSource One's customer base, and so having compliance in various areas was important, like SOC 2, Type 2, HIPAA, PCI, etc. And then wrap it all up with an SLA. We historically have provided 100% SLA on our VMware cloud, and so we carried that forward with OpenCloud. So with that said, I'm going to advance the slide. By the way, only one slide on this presentation, so another one with no major slides. And I wanted to introduce the people who will be speaking with me today. So I have Andy Skripjak from NetSource One. He's the president and CEO, as well as Ed French, who's the VP and CIO. These are two individuals I've gotten to know quite well over the last 18 months. Actually had the chance to go visit their corporate office up in Saginaw, Michigan, back in June. Great experience, by the way. Had the chance to tour the office, and I'm just delighted to see NSO's continued expansion and growth as they do the right things for their customers. So Andy and Ed, and maybe Andy first, I'll hand it over to you to just introduce yourself first, and then maybe just tell me a little bit about NSO. We'll dig into it a little bit further, but just the high level.
Sounds good. David, thanks for the intro. Appreciate it. And just a little bit about NetSource One before we get into the meat of the discussion here. We were founded in 1999. We're headquartered here in Saginaw, Michigan. And we have an operating office in Troy, Michigan for our Metro Detroit presence. We have a team of over 75 professionals, and we're a SOC 2, Type 2, and HIPAA audited technology service provider. We provide services that support help desk support, managed IT, security services, networking and voice solutions, public and private clouds, as well as VCIO and consulting services. And I think what sets us apart, our ability to deliver enterprise-grade solutions with that personal Midwest touch. We're always focused on reliability, compliance, and our client success.
Great. Ed, over to you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I would just add to that, we have a very strong focus on security. It's obviously one of my primary functions, and we always with the team is security first, and then we also try not to just have cookie cutter solutions, where we're trying to fit the customer into the solution. We more try to fit a solution to the customer.
Awesome. Ed, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know it goes back a few decades, let's put it that way.
Yes, I've been working with computers and technologies since about 1982. My mother was actually the secretary to the editor of the Saginaw News, and they had a program to get computers into the houses. And so my first computer was a Tandy Model 3 with the big 10.5-inch floppy drives and a whopping 8K of RAM. And that's where my experience started. I wound up actually when I went to Chesting High School and they didn't have a computer program, but the state was requiring it, and so I wound up teaching during my senior year the first computer class at Chesting High School, and then I went into the Air Force as a telecommunications engineer outside plant, specializing in secure voice and data communications, and then I spent some time for another company doing voice and networking. And then I was at, many people know Kendall Electric. I was their telecom and Rockwell automation specialist after that, the Air Force. And then I came over to NetSource One and have been at NetSource One for 21 years now.
That's awesome.
Uh,
First of all, thanks for your service. Second, I have two very informal questions to ask you. In your journey through this industry, what are you surprised has changed, and what are you surprised has not changed over the years?
you didn't give me those questions ahead of
I
time.
did not. No, I didn't. Sorry about that.
The biggest thing I see is the adoption, and it was when I first started, um, computers were a novelty, and few companies had them, uh, fewer people had them, and now it's just really proliferated the world. You can't go anywhere without being involved with a computer, and the amount of technology that we just carry, on my smartwatch, uh, can far exceed what my Tandy Model 3 could do in 1982. And to think of what my Galaxy Z Fold here can do and what I can do in the palm of my hand is just staggering. But I think the biggest problem that we've had with that is the security. There's so much where it's trying to just make things simple, and you when you make things simple, you lose security, and you always have to keep that security in mind. And we are telling customers all the time, number one thing you have to have multi-factor authentication. And people fight on that, and they don't want it, and they're, oh, the threat actors, they don't care about me. And we tell people all the time, you're right, they don't care about you. They're just going after everybody. And they're just throwing a net out. They're not using a hook. They're throwing a net out and just seeing what they can catch.
Yeah.
So I would say the proliferation of devices, that's the biggest thing. But in all honesty, what hasn't changed? It's still, you have a computer, you have a system, you put data into it, it spits data out. The actual operation, I'd a lot of times tell a story. The first thing I did is, we used to have to type the programs in, and you could save it to the cassette tape, or you could save it to the floppy disk if you had enough room on it. Um, and you had to write your own programs, and you'd get the Tandy catalog, and I typed in, and it was a blackjack program, and I made it so if you put in Ed, Eddie, or Edward as your username, you would get better cards than anybody else. And so I went on for months before my friends figured out why I was beating them all the time. And one of my friends finally said, "No, I want to play as you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you can be player one." He's like, "No, no, I want to play as you." And then the gig was up. But that the problems haven't changed. The graphics have got better, but in all honesty, computers still do the same things that they did 40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, the fundamentals are still there for sure. Note to self, I will never play you in a game of cards if given the opportunity. Um, so Andy, if you would, I mean, just to give the audience a sense, the relationship that US Signal has with NetSource One is really a long-term business and honestly, I think friendship relationship between our two organizations. And, for everybody else, what NSO does is they act as a sort of reseller for certain US Signal managed services and then or cloud services, and then they are layering on top their own value added or differentiated managed services that their customers find value in or drive value from. But Andy, can you give me a sense for who are your customers? What kind of industries are they in? Sizes, just a general overview.
Sure. We play very strongly in probably the top three industries that our clients make up: financial, healthcare, and government. Each one of them has, and I think because of the fact that they're in compliance-based industries, really dovetails nice into our security-minded approach to everything that we do. As we're looking for new solutions for our clients, and there's always a trigger, there's always something that starts a conversation, and it's usually it has to do with equipment refreshes. And we've taken the opportunity since we've partnered with US Signal, and it's been a very long time. um, that conversation has really changed dramatically towards the private cloud, and in this case OpenCloud, what we're talking about. But those conversations, you had asked Ed, what's changed, what hasn't changed. I think our customers' willingness to listen to a cloud solution has drastically improved. And I think it's probably, the overall market is helping us with that. But the success that we've had with US Signal, our other clients that are in the open cloud, that builds on itself. And as you use examples like that, it really smooths out that conversation, and it just makes onboarding that much easier.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks, Andy. So I guess to that end, we're talking about customers and the things we all have to do to keep them happy. I recall back when we were putting together that first advisory board. It was probably back in January that I maybe reached out to you initially. You guys already kind of, and maybe more so Ed than anybody, but you guys already kind of knew that things were going to be changing. When was the first time you realized that you had to make a shift?
As soon as Broadcom officially announced the acquisition of VMware, based on the previous history of what Broadcom had done to products that it purchased, we immediately became cautious. We raised the alarm and we started digging into it. And probably within 2 weeks, which is very unusual when you have an acquisition like this, they started presenting changes to the partner program and started giving many partners a 30-day notice that they were going to be dropping them and that prices were increasing. They started refusing quotes that were already out there. And the quotes would say it was good for 30 days, and they just denied the quotes. Um, so that right there, we knew was going to be the writing on the wall, and so we started exploring other options at that time. And we, at the time, US Signal didn't have an option. We were talking with you guys on that. And so we had explored, obvious choice is you look at AWS, you look at Azure. Being a strong Microsoft partner, we tend to lead down more the Azure path. And so we look at that, but your costs can be very unpredictable in Azure. And it seems like you keep winding up, oh, you need this new little thing, you need this new little thing, and the per minute charges, it can really add up. So for some customers, it's a great fit. For others, it's not. There's also, some of the challenges when you're dealing with a company the size of Microsoft, when you need support, you need something customized. It's truly no, this is what you get. And when it's broke, you get to deal with trying to get support from Microsoft. So that was a challenge we had at that. We looked at on-prem solutions, Hyper-V. That is really our lead on-prem solution now. Primarily, one, we're a gold Microsoft partner, so we have very strong Microsoft skills. And then the second, customers are more comfortable with that than some of the other solutions we looked at, such as like Proxmox and XCP-ng. Not that those are bad products at all. It's just as we look at our skill set, customer acceptance and adaptation, support that you can get from the vendors and support you can get from the communities, the Hyper-V just has a lot more support available for it than you can get with those other solutions. And we had looked at doing an OpenStack cloud ourselves, but the resources that it would take, for us to be able to do that on-prem for our customers, it's not really meant for the small business market. And so when US Signal brought the option to us, it was great. This is something we don't have to manage, and we can give our customers the benefit of that OpenStack cloud solution without us having to maintain the infrastructure for it.
Yeah, very, very fair. And I think that's a good thing to call out too. I mean, we've talked a lot about open source the last 2 days, and we're strong proponents of it for a number of reasons. But I always have to remind customers, especially, that delivering this as a service abstracts you from any of the complexity of either commercial or open source options, right? We're delivering you an SLA. And so it's really up to us and working with our design partners to make sure that that environment is stable, performant, patched, so on and so forth. Ideally, so that you guys can focus on what you do best to your customers.
And that's always a fear of, we manage our customer relationship.
Yep.
And so we're putting our name on the line offering a US Signal solution. And so it was, we've long-standing relationship with US Signal. We've always received great support, but this was a new offering. And so obviously we had concerns doing that. But the adaptation by my engineers um, they just love the product. And we actually have fewer support issues now than we had when we were on-prem VMware. We actually almost forget about the infrastructure portion of it. It just works. And customers have commented that it's more performant than what they had on their previous on-prem solution. And they're accessing these things remotely now. And it's still performing better than when they had it on-prem. So it's been a great transition. And the portal, super simple to use. It's much more intuitive than going through VMware. And I would say, even with the Microsoft experience that we have, it's easier to navigate than Hyper-V and having to go, oh, I got to go to this section, then I got to go to that section, and I have to tie these things together. It just ties it all together very easy for my engineers. And whenever we need support, we call up the NOC, a live person answers, and they get us to the people we need usually pretty quickly.
That's great. I love that. So you talked about, as it relates to OpenCloud, kind of what made you confident in making the switch. I think you talked about a few things. You talked about, I mean, the pre-existing relationship with US Signal, I think, being important. Andy, I think you're on record for saying that, NetSource one of the things you appreciate about our relationship is like you can call us and somebody answers the phone that gives a damn, right? Um,
Yeah.
Either of you tell me a little bit more about, again, you're to your point, you're putting your name on the line to resell US Signal service. That to me is like the highest level of trust possible in a lot of cases.
Well, I think when this all went down and the uncertainty about pricing and licensing and things like that, everybody, MSPs, everybody was searching for alternatives. and they needed to be stable. They needed to be cost effective. And, you know, we did our homework. We spent a lot of time and money looking at alternative solutions. But to be honest with you, when I picked up the phone and I called my account manager and I said, what are you guys doing? We got the, you know, we're sharing the same problem. What are you doing? Because I had more faith in listening to him than all the alternative solutions that we were looking at. So for me, it was an easy choice. It was US Signal. Let's look at what these guys are doing. And, you know, being part of the advisory committee, I think just solidified my, I think my trust in that partnership that we had formed over more than a decade of working with you. And very happy to be part of that. Couldn't be happier with the solution that you guys have offered, and our customers love it. So I think it's a win all the way around.
That's great. And yeah, I can't say how much I appreciate that. And I think not to be dramatic, but I like don't actually think OpenCloud would exist in the same way without, you know, NSO and other partners being part of that process. So thank you for your
Well, I
candid.
could tell you guys were listening, and I was certainly not quiet during that advisory committee all day long session there. That was fun to be a part of it,
Yeah.
and I knew you guys were listening all the way up to the top of the food chain, I believe.
Yeah.
And we shared the same problem. You
Yeah.
guys worked through it very scientifically. You know, my background is one of science, and you test and you evaluate and you test again and you evaluate, and that's what you guys did. And the solution, I think, speaks for itself. All that work that you guys put in is top notch.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you know, I think you're right. And you understand this being a leader of an organization. I think our, you know, executive team's buy-in to make this happen is really a huge part of why it happened. There's a lot of, you know, executive teams who are overly conservative and want to do the easy thing and maybe not the right or the hard thing. And so going through this process has not been easy at times, but it has been worth it for sure. And, you know, listening to you talk is all the evidence that I really need to be honest. So okay, so NSO makes the choice to start. So and for the record for everybody else, NSO still has customers on VMware with US Signal
Mm-hmm.
and now moving to OpenCloud. So there's a migration that is happening,
Yes.
and a lot of people talk about, you know, what is the challenge around migration? Is it rocky? How long does it take? How much does it cost? So, Andy or Ed, for either of you, just tell us a bit about the initial migrations that have been happening for your customers, timeline, performance expectations, so on and so forth.
You want to take that, Ed?
I had a feeling you were going to make me take that. Um, so it has been um, a cooperative experience. You know, it's truly been a team effort. Uh, you use, we work with US Signal and our customer, of course, and we will plan it out. Typically, we will install Acronis and use Acronis to seed the open cloud environment. And then we just keep incrementals going until we're ready to do the cutover. So that way the cutover time can be very short, even for large servers.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you know, you do that, causes very little disruption as that's going on. And now when it's time to do the actual cut, let's say they're on VMware currently, you do have to uninstall the VMware tools and then install the OpenStack plugin. I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head, but we install that, shut down the guest, and then do a final migration, and then bring it up in US Signal. Sometimes you have to reset the IP address depending on the operating system that you're in, especially Linux makes you, because it comes in as a new NIC. But oftentimes Windows, no problem. It keeps the IP address and all the drivers are already there. Things start working. We update some VPN tunnels. And so the routes now go the proper way and the customer is working. You know, we've done some small customers with like, let's say 4 to 5 servers, and we've done those on weeknights. And the customer comes in the next morning and they can't really even tell any difference. we've had, some larger, got one that's got 25 to 30 servers, I believe it is. And we were able to do all of those over one weekend using that process. And when the customer came in and started, and actually it wasn't a full weekend because they operate on Saturdays till like 3.
Yep.
And when the customer came in on Monday morning, everything worked.
Yeah,
And we were
that was
done.
technically, Ed, that was less than a day of elapsed time, and that supports a organization with 4,000 users.
Oh,
That was impressive.
wow, that's great. So okay, so that's a positive surprise. Any other good or bad through the migration process? Any DNS issues, Ed? I feel like there's always a DNS issue to be.
But
There's always DNS and radius. Those two
yeah,
Yeah,
things seem to. We sometimes have a wheel of blame, and
yeah,
it's got primarily 2 engineers' names and DNS.
yeah,
So you spin it and you choose which engineer or that it's
yeah.
DNS. And usually that it's not so much that it was any issue with the servers or anything like that. It's just maybe some things had some DNS caching. There may be some routes cached, some ARP cache. You just have to do some clears. Um, every once in a while, there's been something where, a route wasn't propagating. And so my network engineers and your network engineers just work together to address, any ACLs that are necessary, or maybe a VLAN was missed, something like that. But, something else that we can do is we've often, tested the environment before we cut over the VPN or anything. So you can make sure that you're fully operational. And now the rollback plan is okay. We just turn the servers back up in the customer's production environment or in their vCloud instance. We just turn them back on, and so there's no having to roll everything back or anything like that. Yeah, it means we'll have to cut again another time, but that is your absolute worst case when you do this because you haven't destroyed anything that you had before.
And I think I'd like to take the opportunity to take a step backwards too. Remember, there's a lot of very, let's say, difficult conversations with customers about upcoming VMware pricing changes. Nobody was immune to it. And what was really nice is to have a solid solution that we could offer as an alternative. If somebody did not want to continue down the VM road, we could move them to OpenCloud. And that migration from a US Signal VMware cloud to an OpenCloud was actually quite easy. So, the more challenging ones are the ones that are coming from on-premise to open clouds. But I don't want to make light. It was very simple to take some of our existing workloads in the VMware cloud and move them to open cloud. And the sales process for that, very good. Very predictable costs. So quoting is easy. So when you're talking to your customers about potentially moving in that direction, it's very easy to put the pricing together for that. I don't want to miss that because it's really important.
yeah. Well, and Andy, just talking a little bit about pricing, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Like,
Oh,
what
okay.
is the pricing impact? How does that impact your business as well as your customers' businesses? Because obviously that's the biggest thing with the VMware stuff is everyone saw monster increases, right?
Yeah, so I mean, you look at your options. You had options right out of the gate. Well, if you sign for a multi-year, you can kind of keep your cost the same. It's still going to go up a little bit. If you want to continue on the month to month or whatever, it's going to be very expensive. Or I can come in at tens of percentage points less than what you're paying now and get you on Open Cloud. And to be honest, and this was actually a part of the conversation during the roundtable discussion that we had. Many of our clients don't care what the virtualization platform is. They care about
Right.
uptime, they care about performance, and they care about cost. So OpenCloud fit all of that perfectly.
That's great. Yeah, right. They're consuming applications, their
Yeah,
ERP system or whatever it is, and
yep.
that's really all that they care about at the end of the day. I mean,
Yeah, I
they
think
made
I
the
think our
decision to
first
part with an
client,
NSO. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
our first client that we migrated was a small accounting firm. And when they came back in on Monday morning, never missed a beat. And the only comment that we got is like, hey, it's faster. That's a good comment to get.
That is a good comment. That is. So speaking of, cost and performance benefits, I mean, sounds like on the cost front, tens of percentage points lower in terms of your underlying cost structure, which conceivably allows you then to go and sell to your customers at a more competitive rate, whether it's a current customer or a, net new
Yep.
logo, right?
So I could maintain my margin when quoting out these solutions. I could maintain my margin and save the customer money. That doesn't happen very often. That combination, that's kind of like the golden standard
Yeah.
there. You can do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
That's fantastic. And then on the performance front, you mentioned an anecdote from that accounting firm that performance seemed better. And is that due to Cloud Stack? I don't know. Is it due to it's all flash storage everywhere? Maybe. But like any other anecdotes from either Ed or Andy just on the performance front?
I would say primarily everything that we have migrated to OpenCloud has had 100% uptime since we've migrated. And the customers notice that too, and they don't have to worry, especially the ones we've migrated from on-prem. They don't have to worry about their UPS. They don't have to worry about power in their building. They don't have to worry about the air conditioning. So now many of them, they're like, I get the storage closet back. And we're like, it was never a storage closet in the first place, even though you stacked everything in there. Because everyone knows in many businesses, they don't properly dedicate the space that you need for your IT infrastructure. And so, customers, they're seeing improved uptime and reliability because of taking advantage of the carrier grade equipment that US Signal provides. And they're seeing reduced cost on their side by not having to power that equipment, cool the equipment. Um, it's just been a win for them across the board.
Awesome. That's great.
I'd like to add to that. I think, and we talked about this a little bit before. I do think the Infinidad all flash storage plays a major part in the performance of this environment.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been really happy with the relationship with Infinidad. It's, the best thing is you find a technology platform that just works and you don't have to spend
Yep.
time managing
Well,
it.
you're
And that's really what we found with Infinidad for sure.
right. We're not talking about it. These are the conversations we love not having with our clients. When we're talking strategy and things like that, we're not talking about what kind of platform we're running on because it works. And
Yeah.
and people, tend to kind of forget that's very important, that you can just focus on what's important for their business, not that the fact that their VMware environment is not working correctly.
Yeah. It's funny, I was a customer 7 years ago of a company that sold VMware cloud services, and um, things overall from an infrastructure and app perspective ran so well that everyone sort of forgot that things were running well. And so we as an IT team had to make the intent to like actually call out when things were running really well because no one wants to talk about it then, right? They only want to talk about
Sure.
it when something breaks. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Welcome
Well,
to the
okay,
club,
so
David.
yeah. So just let's look forward. You mentioned now you have choice when it comes to your customers, and I think that ability to have choice is huge, especially faced with no choice at not so distant future, not so distant past. How do you see OpenCloud helping you prepare for future change or disruption as you continue to sustainably grow your business?
I think from my perspective, it's very clear. And as a business owner and a leader, getting my team focused in one direction is incredibly powerful. So for us, the stability, the ease of working with your team, the quoting process, the partnership, that matters more than ever. And it's strengthened our infrastructure team. They've bought into it. They love it, and we're just committed to delivering resilient, future ready solutions for our customers. We never have to think that what we're presenting to them is somehow subpar. We're looking into the future, and I know you're working on new things, and we're anxiously awaiting the arrival of DAS and some DR replication. I believe you call it sync safe.
Yep.
We can't wait to get our hands on that stuff.
Awesome. I love to
And
hear
I would
that.
say, from a technical aspect, um, with my engineers not needing to spend as much time to support these solutions, I can support more customers and more environments with the same engineers. I don't have to bring in additional resources. And it also just reduces the stress on my engineering team.
And I think, I don't know if either of you know this, but my first job in IT was actually at a managed service provider, similar size maybe to NSO. This was obviously a long time ago, but um, I think working at an MSP can be difficult sometimes, and you have a lot of customers that you have to keep happy. And honestly, the more time you can focus on building relationships with those customers as a tech and understanding their environments, the better the overall experience becomes versus fixing broken technology, right? Which, is always what we're here for, of course, but not as a full-time job, ideally.
Right.
And I think,
Yeah.
everyone is trying to watch their capital budget. And so, especially as equipment's aging out and in today's environment, you have to keep your equipment updated. That's the hardware, the OS. And so being able to migrate to a private cloud solution, like the OpenStack cloud, that just, you now don't have to have that capital expense that a lot of small businesses don't have the money for, you know, hey, I need $200,000 to upgrade my infrastructure so that I can remain compliant. And instead, we can turn that into a reliable, manageable monthly charge.
Awesome.
I think too, I think the flexibility that the private cloud offers, for example, just last week, had a discussion with a client that we've had for a very long time, and it was a hardware refresh conversation. And it was, okay, here we go. We're looking into that crystal ball again. You're going to need X number of devices. You're going to need this big of a SAN. You're going to need all these things that potentially would support you the next 5 years, except we can't see 5 years from now. Moving to the
Right.
private cloud, we can scale up and down at ease. You just get rid of all of those concerns. So I think that's a very strong point when moving to the private cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. Andy, that's such a great point. I mean, when I was a customer, we had some on-premise infrastructure and some that was in cloud and private cloud. And I always told my boss, the CEO, when we're going in and making a capital purchase, we're guessing, we're projecting 3 to 5 years out at what we think we'll need. And the truth is, you never get it right. You either overbuy or you underbuy. If you
Correct.
overbuy, you've now spent capital that was inefficient because the business isn't using it. If you underbuy, I get to go back and have an uncomfortable conversation around, needing to, expand the storage network or whatever it is, right? And so, I think that's, and similarly, I think what tends to happen with on-premise infrastructure is, you have a domain controller, maybe we'll give it 12 gigs of RAM, even though it really only needs 8, right? Well, that difference costs money. It's not obvious, but it costs money. And so, I think one of the opportunities of moving into a cloud solution is to really be smart about allocating resources, which I think we
Yep.
all have to do these days.
And I think it's great. Maybe there's some partners out there that maybe aren't comfortable with sizing those things. I would like to take the opportunity, working with the team at US Signal during the quoting process, the sizing, things like that. Very, very good experience. Very good experience. I look forward to it almost all the time. And so from a sales perspective and quoting these out, our timelines have shrank drastically when we're putting solutions together that are focused on open cloud as opposed to, like, say, an on-premise solution. So less engineer time, less sales time. I think it's a winning combination.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and for everybody else, we use in our sort of pre-sales partnership process, we're using a combination of tools and people to help drive a recommendation. One could go and right size an environment in a spreadsheet, but doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best approach for the customer. So we're always sort of partnering hand in hand to figure that out. But again, I think to your point with the flexibility of open cloud. there's no need to put 20% on top just because it's just really not
Right.
necessary at this stage.
Right. Right.
All right. So closing out, Andy and Ed, what's next for you guys? Now, you don't even need to answer this from a US Signal Open Cloud perspective, but like, where is your business going? What are you looking forward to in the future? Other than Ed, your Hawaii vacation coming up in a few months, which I'm sure you're quite looking forward to. Just give us a sense for where you're going.
Well, I mean, simply, we're looking at our clients' workloads right now and planning out migration away from VMware for just about all of them. And most of those will include a conversation about OpenCloud. Some of them certainly have on-premise requirements, but anybody that doesn't need to be on-prem, it's going to be an OpenCloud conversation. And again, I had mentioned this previously, the DR aspect that you guys are rolling out with sync safe replication. We're very interested in that for some of our clients that just want that extra layer of disaster recovery capabilities. Looking forward to that. Ed?
Right.
I would add AI and automation. Even though they're throwing AI, because now there's the generative AI, and it's made a lot of progress, but there was AI 40 years ago. It's just greatly improved and has become available to the masses. And so we're focusing a lot on that, especially automation of repetitive tasks, analysis of data, simplifying processes, ensuring consistency with processes. So that is another major focus of us, as well as security. And still, the world revolves around relationships and people. And so, even though there's a lot of instant messaging and stuff like that, people still want to talk to people. And so, we still strongly support voice systems and help make sure that you have a voice communication system that supports your customers.
Fantastic. Well, Andy and Ed, as always, I greatly appreciate the chance to speak with you guys today. We do, for the audience, we have a video testimonial which we filmed up at NSO's office. You'll see that background potentially in some of the B-roll. So feel free to check that out. I think marketing just dropped it in the chat. But Andy and Ed, thank you so much for your long-term partnership. Thanks for all you do to your customers and how much you work with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Thank you both. Have a great day. Just for everybody else, we will be hearing from Taylor Greiner in about 7 minutes. Taylor is going to be talking about navigating multi-cloud. I suspect you're going to see some pretty cool stuff, some out-of-the-box thinking on how to combine OpenCloud with the likes of AWS and Azure. So please stay tuned for that in a few minutes. Thank you.